It is 4 o'clock, so we're gonna get started. Um, Let me share a presentation with it. Oh, I forgot, this needs to. Hector, do you know how to get this on the TV?
Oh, TV.
Yeah. Here, okay. A few minutes here, thank you. Yeah. Right, then, okay. And then I'll start with the points. And then.
Can you use like Apple minutes we have?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, here, I can move my stuff. Yeah, go for it.
I think, yeah.
He's so big and power is so small.
Yeah, everything's remote based now. Like, you know, why would you want to touch it?
Okay.
Oh, look at that.
Oh,
So you
wow.
talk me to the from your left.
You do like an airplane.
Yeah.
Situation.
Would- yeah.
What's your set?
They're clear.
This one there.
Oh,
Another one to the right.
oh,
So screen mirroring. It's on the same,
Wireless.
one.
It's expecting you to be in my.
Oh, we're on guest network, so it might be different network.
yeah,
Ew.
But if it's Bluetooth.
yeah.
We just have to allow it.
Okay.
No.
You guys want me to do my spiel, so we're not just staring at.
Yeah.
Like, so many- Yeah, we don't, it's like everyone's staring at you, so it gives you so much more pressure. So I just wanted to introduce myself and then give a little backstory to why we're here today. So my name is Joshua Bombard. I'm the Southern Oregon Regional Representative for the Department of Land Conservation and Development. So my department oversees the statewide land use planning program, and I'm the Southern Oregon's representative for the department. So I work with the communities in Jackson, Josephine, and Douglas counties to try to implement the planning program. So we also have, as part of what we do, we also have a pretty substantial grant program where we have a lot of grants that we issue for housing related work, for climate friendly and equitable communities work, and then some more general technical assistance work. So probably a year ago, the city approached me and asked about using some grant money to study the urban growth boundary, because they want to expand their urban growth boundary, because obviously everyone knows that housing is a critical shortage here. So what I said to them is the problem with just studying where to expand your boundary is that you need to be able to justify. You need to be able to justify that you need to expand your boundary, and having such a good chunk of land in the railroad district will actually count against the city, because at least on paper it shows up as vacant or underutilized land. So what I said is, instead of analyzing and studying your UGB right now, expanding your boundary. I think you all need to focus a little bit more on the railroad district and figure out whether or not it's financially feasible or it's feasible in general to develop that land, and if not, then you have the grounds and the information to justify it. Maybe swapping that land out or doing an urban growth boundary, but until you have that information, you don't really have enough to work on. So that was kind of the backstory of why we're here, is to really for the city to take take a hard look at the railroad district to figure out whether it's feasible to develop it, to develop part of it, whether it makes any sense at all, and to itemize, and what these guys are here to do is to try to eventually pull in as much information as possible and itemize opportunities and kind of provide a report to the city about the potential for the district. So that's why we're here, and these, I'm gonna turn over to these guys. I just wanted to take some of the heat off of Hector right there to work the IT stuff, but I'm available as a local resource if you guys have questions later on. You know, we have a consultant team here who's going to be, they're going to be the point of contact for this project, but I'm available in the future if you all have questions or comments. Don't want to go to the city for some.
Thanks, Jeff. So while we get the TV working, we'll just do a round of introductions. So we'll start with our team, and then of course we would like to, one of our primary objectives is just to get to know you and see your faces. So we would love a short introduction from each of you, so we know your background and relation to the railroad district and any other details you want to share. Alex, you want to start?
Sure. Alex Joyce with Cascadia Partners. I'm the managing partner and oversee all of our housing related and real estate feasibility work. So I live in Bend, but the company is based in Portland, and we have about 18 staff, planners, economists, urban designers, people who help on these kinds of feasibility analyses and a whole bunch of other types of planning work. And our company has been assisting the state on a variety of housing related topics in jurisdictions all over the state for a number of years. So helping cities figure out how to tailor their policies and their investments to produce the type of housing that their population needs. So we get to work on projects that are site specific like this, but also projects that are more sort of full city, looking at how to calibrate zoning code to generate housing types that are needed and more affordable. So we're always excited to work on projects that have a real site component to them. And I don't know if there's anything else you want me to say about the company.
I think that's okay. That's good. Yeah, great. I'll go next. Victor Tran. Hopefully, I came up and shook your hand at the beginning there. I'm the project manager for this project with the City of Talent and DLCD. My background is more on the real estate feasibility and urban design side. Now I'll pass it to Ray.
Hi, I'm Ray Haggerty. I'm a senior associate with Cascadia Partners. I have a background in housing development and housing policy, so I really like to look at kind of specific sites like we are today and think about housing from that perspective. Nice to meet you all.
I'm Joy Finally. I'm on the Talent Planning Commission right now, and I've been part of the planning commission on the city council for every application 93, 18, this last one, but it was like a 5-year slot. And I was also here, and I could have this what we created and plan. Some things the state are teaching.
Are you talking about the master plan?
Yes.
Okay, so that was adopted in 2006, right? Okay, so yeah, we're almost up to the 20-year mark there.
I'm Walt Davis. I'm also on the commission. I also live on Belmont Road. I've been on the commission 3 years, I think, at this time, involved in other that's I do feasibility studies and things like that.
I'm Mary Sweet. I am not living in the city. I'm not familiar with the boundary. I'm just sure. proposed to be closed in this, living development area. And really, they've been a moving part, our property has been a moving part of this discussion. We don't think of it as 20 years, we think of it as the third decade. So, we have some insights into the interjurisdictional components of this, there are substantial blockages for the full growth of the garden.
Right, you've built up there. On the commission. About what we're doing in the event. I was doing the thing that I had moved and moved and we did it. Also, in that perspective. And now feeling go out of their feeling go out of what's going on, and concerned about how their life is going to be affected.
Thank you.
I'm Kathy Kurtzman, we live on Hilltop Road, which is a part of RDMC. And, we came here to see what's going on.
I'm Tom Lowell. I was a part of the railroad district master planning process that was in the 90s. Anybody else here participate in that? So, David Ruler, that's been around a while, and I also have been involved in numerous planning applications to Jackson County. So I have quite a bit of experience in the county going back 40 years.
Terry Nolan, city manager,
I'm Shandell Clark, and I am the land use planner for RV Cog. And I am also here to listen, I'm the participant, and fun to do this.
My name is Nick Schubert. I am the community development assistant at the City of Talent. I am new-ish. I started this job at the end of November 2023. So again, I am also here to listen and kind of get a greater aspect of what we're doing in this project. So glad to be here.
Great. All right. Hey, look at that.
There we go.
It resolved just in time, so thank you for your patience. Remember to talk into
Oh,
this.
yeah, I guess we should, I don't, do we have anyone participating? on-
Yeah, do we? No. So,
These are not so much so that,
I see.
hear each other, but, I don't think we have,
No, it's just us. I'm keeping an eye on.
I'll keep an eye out.
Okay.
If we have someone join online, then we'll just have to remember to use these so that they can.
Great. This is our first advisory committee of two. And so our agenda today, we did the introductions and we have a few slides to go through, mostly for our fact-finding process for this project. My goal is to move through them pretty quickly. Our primary objective is to hear from you. So we'd like to carve out as much time as possible for us to get to our discussion questions and have a meaningful conversation. For our slide deck today, we'll cover kind of the why of the project, which Josh talked about, so thank you for that. We'll also cover our knowledge of the history and overview, and again, we'd love to benefit from your perspective, being involved much longer than we have. We'll review the infrastructure assessment for the railroad district, the land use procedures, and finally, we'll end on next steps for our project and the discussion. So to start with the why are we doing this part, this project is really rooted in three big components. So the first is we know housing is a growing need, and it continues to be a growing need for the city. The railroad district is the city's only designated area within the urban growth boundary that is meant for housing growth, or was designed, for housing growth when it was formulated. And it's just been a while since the city has taken an earnest look at the information available to make an assessment of what to do next. So our team's job is to provide the city with a fresh look of what are the key components that could make feasibility more worth it in the railroad district and detail out the opportunities and the challenges. When I say feasibility, we're breaking it up by a few key components here. So the first one is around infrastructure costs. Our job here is to understand what are the infrastructure components that are needed to service the railroad district. And maybe more unique to this project, give them an updated cost amount. So whether that's water, sewer, electricity, road upgrades, railroad crossings, we want to take a comprehensive look at what those infrastructure pieces are and attach a cost to them. The second one is around land use procedures. So we want to understand, especially for the railroad district, because it is mixed jurisdiction, both city and county, what are the land use procedures it needs to go through to allow for development, and what are the time horizons that are associated with those procedures. The third bucket is around market feasibility. So our team is scoped to do a market assessment to determine the level of interest that the larger community has for a piece of land that is the railroad district. Are there development types that would work better? What is the projected housing capacity of these types? And finally, are there tools and strategies that can be utilized to contribute for development? Our last bucket is around understanding the city and landowner commitment. This is more around the question of, is there a political willingness of the city, landowners, and residents for making the railroad district happen? As I said before, all of this is rooted in our wanting to provide the city with clarity for what to do with the railroad district. Obviously, development anywhere is challenging, but we want to shed as much light as possible and provide an up-to-date understanding of all the different pieces of the railroad district so the city can make a good decision of what to do.
So at the end of the day, the report that will be generated, we hope the city will be able to decide if it's worth it to achieve housing objectives to lean in on this area to generate housing, or if they need to go through another, rather complicated process to produce a justification to modify the urban growth boundary and take this area out or portions of this area out and look at other areas, which is in and of itself a very long process. Josh, you previewed that path, which is not this path. It's a path that could be pursued by the city subsequent to this. And this provides some of that insight. Is the railroad district worth kind of continuing to focus on, or do we need to take a different path? That question will be answered by the city.
So I always like to try to simplify stuff so that we don't waste time. What if it turned out that nobody in the railroad district wanted to develop it? This gentleman here, he could probably give us a lot of insight as to, at least that's what he said, what his neighbors' intentions are. I mean, why spend a lot of money on the first three procedures and then get to the fourth one and then find out none of those people, or at least it'd be worthwhile to find out at the beginning which ones of them are interested in developing their lands and which ones aren't. Otherwise, you're just spinning your wheels like what's happened for the last 20 or 30 years. You're not getting anything done.
Yeah, that's a good question. We are working on these different buckets concurrently. So a big part of it, like this meeting today, is just to hear from all of you and get some perspective on the political willingness. Are there bright spots we should know about? What are the challenges you're most worried about? So like I said, it's our approach of taking a comprehensive look at all the different pieces that make up this big bucket we're calling feasibility. So this information obviously very valuable, and having the city involved and being able to hear your perspective would be a part of assessing the feasibility of the district.
So yeah, the development's not gonna happen unless you have willing landowners and also the support at some level of the city, because some of these things are quite complicated issues to untangle for any single landowner. So I think those are on equal footing.
Yeah.
To any of these other things, and we're not waiting to assess that last one. It looks like it's a linear process, but they're all part of the process
Well, the
today.
arrow's shown.
Yeah.
It's not the last step. All of these things are gonna be talked about today. The market feasibility and market analysis is coming next, but we have some information to report out on infrastructure. But a big part of today is actually related to that last one, to sort of see, is this of interest? Both to the owners and the city, because that's a pretty critical ingredient.
I'm wondering if, you folks visited the site.
Yep.
Yeah, we went there this morning, took a look around. We met with the public works staff, but none of the current residents that were there. We would, of course, like, love to hear from you all, other residents that live in the railroad district. We're available for like one-on-one interviews, but it's part of our fact finding is to understand the perspective of current landowners and property owners in the railroad district. So if you have recommendations, please let us know. We're happy to follow.
And Tom, I'll add that that can't be the only factor. Because on the flip side of that, our land use planning program is really set to preserve and conserve farm and forest land, especially high value farm and forest land. And if you just gauge people's interest in development, that would really undermine the land use planning program, because it would provide a lot more incentive to go only where people want to develop and away from where people don't. So all I'm saying is I think they painted the picture really well. It's part of a bigger equation and part of a bigger set of analyses that needs to happen, but it can't be by itself the only justification for not going somewhere or going somewhere.
Well, aren't the lands that are in the urban growth boundary, weren't they put in there because people already agreed they should be developed?
Not all, no, some.
I mean, it would seem to me that that's the whole purpose of having an urban growth boundary is you're projecting that the urban is gonna be moving into that area. That's the whole point of having it. And what I'm saying is that people that are on Hilltop Drive that are in there, they may have no interest in developing their land at all, which is their prerogative.
We are not in the urban growth project.
You're in the railroad
Yeah.
district. Okay, so that's the
Yeah, but
thing.
it's still-
Some of it is in the urban.
I totally understand your point, though, that my response, and this might not be totally acceptable response, is that we're looking at things from a long-term perspective. When we're talking about housing needs generally, or cities' needs when they're updating their long-range plan, we're thinking about 20 years. Obviously, if you can control it, you don't want to be bringing property owners in or properties in that don't have an intent to develop in the short term. But really, we're trying to keep our eye on the longer term plan. So I didn't mean to derail this too much, but there's a lot that goes into this equation, and then I don't want to complicate it too much, but the flip side is if the city doesn't want to go here, they want to go somewhere else, then that brings a whole nother side of the equation to where do you go, and what are the infrastructure needs there, and what are the impacts, what kind of soils are there agricultural practices, so there's a lot, it kind of gets really complicated quickly.
Yeah.
Right, but I'm just saying, if they're pushing, definitely, does not want to develop their land, like I think probably a lot of people up there on the hilltop area are of that mind. I think you should find that out first, because otherwise you're just doing a lot of background work. I mean, we've been working on this project for 30 years and nothing's happened.
Well, it's one of several lanes of information we want to find out. So it's one of the reasons why we're here today, one of the reasons why we have scope and budget available for one-on-one interviews. So this is the first step. And if you have folks this group wants us to talk to, let us know. Interestingly, landowner willingness is not one of the criteria the state uses to decide how to expand UGB. But as a practical matter,
Housing price.
but as a practical matter, it's an important consideration. As we said, there, but like, can it be served by infrastructure?
The
Yeah.
practical.
Sure, and that's why it's here. Even though it's not an official, you know, threshold test at the state level, we understand that it's an important consideration. Equally important is the city's, you know, interest and willingness to support too, right?
Yeah, I'll preface too by saying our project is not a comparative study. We are not looking at other urban reserves and comparing them to the railroad district in terms of feasibility. It is solely to shed as much light on the different aspects of the railroad district and make known as much as we can what those different facets are. There may be a, a follow-up in the future, we don't know, but our job is just to understand as fully as we can what is happening in the railroad district and try to quantify those and articulate them. We have a lot to get through, so I think what I'll do is I'll power through the slides, and then we have a set of really good discussion questions that I'd like us to pivot towards. I think a lot of your opinions will probably come in there. If there is anything along the way, please do let me know, but I'm gonna flip through our slides here and get us through the next set of content.
But if anything's unclear, just raise your hand, we'll pause and discuss it.
Yeah. And like I said, our objective really is today is fact finding. We're gonna present some slides on what we know, and we'd like to understand, is that off the mark? Are there other things we need to consider? So it really is a fact finding session. Okay, so I'll skip this part. It covers our objectives for this meeting, but like I already said, it's to meet all of you, present on what we know, and to seek your input on what those, what we have in our slide deck. So first covering the history and overview, Tom, I know you alluded to this. The railroad district has been a site for development interest since the late 90s, from what we have gathered. There was a master plan that was made in the 2000s. And despite plans for development, there hasn't been much change over the years. I'm sure you're all aware, but the Belmont subdivision is kind of the most recent effort for development, and it faces its own set of challenges. The city, as of 2017, according to the housing needs analysis, needed a little over 1,250 new dwelling units. Obviously, this was before the fire in 2020. So again, all to say, the housing need is quite urgent, and the railroad district at the time was projected to host roughly 400 units, so making up a portion of that housing need for the city. I'm gonna skip our timeline here, but I'll say for the existing land use and zoning, it is mixed jurisdiction. Some parcels in the railroad district are governed by the city, some by the county. From what we could see from the map, there are around 15 unique property owners. You could probably tell us exactly who those people are. And the majority of the railroad district is zoned low density residential. There's a small portion that's light industrial. That's kind of the current state of play in terms of land use and zoning. The table on the left shows the housing need from the housing needs analysis from 2017. And I'll just repeat the fact that the master plan from 2007 projected roughly 400 units of capacity from the railroad district. Part of our market assessment will help ground truth what we think the capacity for housing units could be. So it could be close to 400 or something else, but that's something we intend to find out through our market assessment.
I mean, this is an important point to underscore, right? If there's, let's just say at least 1,200 units of housing need locally, probably more now, since this is, from 2017. The only substantial portion of the UGB or growth boundary that's still available for housing can really only accommodate a third of that which is probably low. So even with this built at its current zoning, it's a third, you're making up sort of a third of the housing need. Part of that is the fact that it's quite zoned for quite low density, but it's just an important thing. So even building on every portion of your that's a substantial size is not going to close the gap as it's currently zoned.
Exactly. In terms of buildable land, obviously the railroad district is quite sloped. There's roughly 34 acres of relatively flat land, so between 0 and 5% slope and 5 to 10% slope. There's roughly 50 acres of land in the railroad district that's 10 to 25% slope, which would be very, very challenging to build on. But the rest of it, that 34 acres, is more feasible for development.
And then there's a lot of these slides are related to sort of technical feasibility, right? And that's a part of the equation of feasibility. There's other elements like landowner and kind of will and political commitment. But a lot of these relate to what portion of the property is technically feasible for development. And then that gets into the preference.
Yeah, we'll cover the technical stuff first and then pivot to the, from the landowner city resident feedback. So I'll move us on to the universe of infrastructure and what we know from infrastructure. So the high level takeaways are on the railroad side, discussions with the corp are absolutely necessary. They dictate a lot of what happens to the railroad and the rules around crossings and types of improvements. So an ongoing conversation with the corp is necessary. What's the corp?
Corps of Engineers.
The Army.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the
railroad company itself.
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
There are funding limitations. There are various improvements that have been identified in the transportation system plan, for example, other infrastructure updates. From our read of things, securing funding is one of the biggest challenges facing the railroad district. That being said, the most recent progress is there was a 1 million gallon water tank on Hunts Road that was installed. So that was a big piece of infrastructure that went in, which we'll cover that in a second. For electricity, the railroad district has some established infrastructure, but would require more to service future development. And then for water, sewer, and stormwater, there's sufficient capacity, but there are unique needs to each that I'll cover in individual slides here in a second. So starting with railroad, there are 5 railroad crossings that bisect the railroad district itself. Improvements have been identified for Rapp Road and Belmont Road. Those are kind of the 2 that the city has identified as needing improvements. And the current port policy is that if you improve one railroad access, it typically leads to the closure of another. So this is kind of an important thing to keep in mind. The reason why I say a conversation with the corp is needed is because their policy isn't set in stone. So there are case-specific reasons and rationale that the city could provide or residents could provide to the corp that would change their policy around what would happen to each individual crossing. Some of those include safety and accessibility. So for example, the wildfires are a big one. But if there was a strong case to say we need railroad crossings for safety and accessibility, if there was future development, all of these things can be taken on a whole and given to the corp as consideration for what they think is best policy for the 5 individual crossings. This ties into this point that a unified development vision is most likely the strongest case for advocating what happens to each individual railroad crossing currently it's kind of on a crossing by crossing case. But if there was some consensus amongst the railroad district in terms of what its near future could be, you could take that on a whole and present that to the court as a way of saying, this is our vision for the district, here's what we would like to do with each individual crossing. Maybe the priorities are keeping as many open as possible. Maybe the vision is around safety and accessibility. But the point here is the unified vision is likely a stronger case to be made than individual, process.
Well, what I'm hearing is you're saying that Blackwell and Belmont to become the major access points from up railroad. And then putting in 450,000 homes, how much you be planning the space with two exits?
That's the hypothetical.
And when you have a fire, I have no problem getting across the railroad,
Mhm,
in that town.
mhm.
2 hours. 2 hours, yeah, a mile. So my truck's being walking away and there's total chaos. And I was ready and the possibility of having moving out to effort for hundreds of homes and having a car stall.
Yeah, that's,
And it seems like safety is a major concern and that the need means multiple coffee.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is an arena where the city has a very limited amount of influence. Railroads are in the US are very special entities.
Understanding what the railroad is going to do. Therefore, it will be coming for the city, for safety, it's going to be for the city.
Yeah, I think it's a very real concern. We hear you. I think it's very serious.
yeah, I think that's really strong rhetoric for the court. I think the more perspective it carries of, around safety and accessibility, the more the court has to consider for its current, policy. So point well taken. I think this is something.
Well, it's like, go down through a road. They don't sit correctly. If the city can still foresee and have not be uploaded.
Right, yeah, that's something that the city, the court, ODOT would have to come together and get to some agreement or not, and decide to do it.
There's one more, there's one more entity that you haven't mentioned, which is the ODOT. Who's responsible for the rules and making sure everything's implemented to the national standards. Because crossing and the road, so, I want to make sure that that's not done.
Yeah.
The other thing is that we continually hear, year after year, when we talk to ODOT, they all, when we talk to court. Due to applications for development and all this, they've chimed in every year, as recently as, I think, 22. They're standing by their statement that 3 crossings will close. And I don't know why it's still an issue for, I wonder what we're going to do, you're pretty clear about it. So, and the other issue being that both ODOT Rail and Corp and the state and the county are going to have no part in paying for any of the improvements or the closures or the alternate accesses that are required, so I don't see us wasting the time to talk about what will Corp and ODOT Rail do. They've already said it.
Yeah, we understand the standard practice and that's like the 2-for-1 trade.
It's not even a standard practice, it's application specific.
That's been their position. I think the perspective from ODOT, because we did talk to them, is that is likely what would happen if you play this out fully, but there have been instances where there's a package deal that improves safety and it doesn't require a 2-for-1 trade. We're just sharing what we know, that's all.
Sure. That's our goal too. I was going to point out that I'm wondering if it's actually possible to build the railroads crossings to the standards that are needed because of sightline road grade. Business covers visibility issues like that, that I don't think they ever actually been addressed. By any plans in a form.
Yes, some of them have been looked at and are further along than others, like for example, this one I have up on screen, Rat Road. There was a study in the transportation system plan to at least like estimate the costs associated with realigning the road and upgrading the costs for the crossing. And with the Belmont crossing, there was kind of more recent action towards this because of the subdivision process. And it would require, upgrading the road to collector standard, changes to the grade, things like that. All to say, it is very costly, these changes, all changes can be made. It's just a matter of cost. So, with these specific road crossings, those costs are a little bit more known. And then I think for ODOT's sake, but maybe for the Corp also, the reason they have this soft policy around closing crossings is mostly due to safety. But however, if that concern was addressed, this is why we say there's kind of a soft spot towards negotiation or some flexibility towards a conversation with. Is if there was a more unified concern around safety, accessibility, future development, that's a conversation to be had. Hopefully that answers the question.
But I mean, this is obviously to everyone in the room, this is one of the most major constraints that we have. And
Yeah.
the point is, it's complex, it involves,
Does it also require the collector road to be built? I mean,
Yeah, that's,
if you're building and.
the frontage.
Even if the crossing is made, still be a collective nightmare.
right.
Are you referring to the frontage road that was contemplated on the south side of the road? Is that what you're
I
thinking?
know I'm talking about the collector road, but it runs from Route to Belmont.
Yes, that one.
Yeah.
Oh, you call that a frontage road?
It's fronting onto the railroad.
I would say it's frontage. No, less for it.
No,
Along enough road.
No, yeah, you're right. It's just, the connector on the south side of the railroad. I just wanted to make sure we were talking about the same road.
When was the road study done? Oh, 2015, sorry, there was. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it's an unsolvable problem. It's never really just wasting the time, trying to find a solution to this railroad crossing and what does it do.
That's what we're here to find out.
yeah.
We gotta go through this process. I mean,
I can tell you right now, everybody on this side of the table, basically already told me that that's the situation.
It's not technically unsolvable.
No, I'm talking about feasibly, practically, we've been struggling with this problem for the last 30 years, nothing's been done. People have been wasting money with lawyers and everything else, it's the same problem. Everybody on this side of the table just told you it's not gonna be fixed.
Well, I didn't hear that exactly, but I mean,
Maybe there are other funds.
well, maybe not. There are trade-offs involved in this. The closures are a big trade-off, right? Like, that's a significant issue. The upgrading is a costly and complex engineering endeavor. There's no right of way that exists for this collector road today. It's not, that's just a line on a map. So I'm not arguing that it's not complicated, but there's a will, there's a way. We're trying to figure out, present that the facts on feasibility and decide if there's the will to overcome them and the resources.
Well, I'm just making a recommendation right now, if you really want to solve the problem, you avoid the railroad crossing issue by redesigning the whole thing.
Redesigning the whole railroad district. Is that what you're saying?
Redesigning it so that it doesn't, feasibility doesn't depend on improving the railroad crossing. With all of us on this side of the table, pretty much already told you, it's probably not gonna happen because it's not feasible.
There was a proposal in, I forget the year, to go underneath the railroad crossing, which obviously doesn't, have a conflict point. The downside of that proposal is it's incredibly expensive. But it does not require closures because it's actually reducing a conflict point with, it's not crossing, it's going under or over. So while that is advantageous from the railroad's perspective, it's significantly more expensive.
And a big part of today is just presenting what we know. And also, hearing your perspective and taking that as part of our, fourth bucket that we have. So this is kind of what we know technically, and then there's the human side, which we obviously acknowledge.
May I see that slide in the bucket crossing map? Going to 2017,
As well.
the map crossing slide, I was wondering if they had all the ODOT said that it would have to be to be called a level, what they call it, but it was separated, right, that's what it was, we have to get some over everything, which would be at the high cost from the.
You're asking if that's what was proposed in RAP?
Yeah, I was just wondering if that included that information that it has to be separated from the.
It's,
That road, I don't see that.
yeah, it's likely detailed in the transportation system plan itself. So somewhere in the footnotes of
So
what,
is that the engineering cost, the estimating cost of that for the engineering one?
that was the cost that was listed in the transportation system plan.
It's not, we have a full, but if it's in the, I'm not saying whether it's correct now, that if it's in the TSP, it should be what the full bill is.
Yeah.
What it should be.
These are $2015, but I doubt that's for an under crossing or an over crossing, that would be. Off by zero.
Yeah, that's what they said, it would, but, not able to, they will require a separating cost and all that. When they're using they don't work, and the city will have to do it.
But
It's
the-
in the record.
Yeah, from what we understand, it's similar to the Belmont Road crossing. Different or separated. I'm gonna move us along. And so for water and stormwater, our understanding is that there is sufficient water capacity in the city to service the railroad district. However, those service lines are critically needed. So Helms Road water tank was installed in 2021, I think, and then the transmission lines that run from the water tank are there, they go under the railroad. But if future development were to happen in the road district, they would need individual service lines to develop it. So that's on the water side. And then for stormwater, it is not legally allowed to channel stormwater into the irrigation canal. So it would have to be piped to Talent Avenue, where upgrades to the stormwater capacity would be needed, or it could be piped to an area further offsite where more capacity exists. So there would be costs there that we would have to figure out.
I really want you to get through this so we can get it to discussion.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay, thanks, Wayne.
And just to be clear, I mean, any development proposal that was on a vacant piece of land that's large like this, that's not been approved before. You would have to go through the consideration of each of these utilities, right? Because everyone wants to be able to use plumbing and all those kind of things. The question for us in this exercise as we document these is, are these significantly higher hurdles than some other like piece of property, around hypothetical piece of property around town? Like, are these uniquely challenging to the point where it negatively impacts you?
Yeah.
Right, but everywhere needs plumbing, everywhere needs traffic access, everywhere needs these things. But how high is the bar for each of these? And I think at the end of the day, the transportation access and the stormwater stood out as some of the most complicated, costly components. So to be aware of,
Yeah.
like for emergency services, but also just resident access.
Our first step is to articulate what the state of infrastructure is, and then our second step is to work with the public works staff to determine how much it would cost to hypothetically service the entirety of the railroad district, should it be considered for development. So we're kind of laying out just the first step here, which is articulating what the state of infrastructure is. So I'll move us along to sewer. Our understanding there is capacity is sufficient, but like water, it's missing service lines to the railroad district. One additional detail is there would need to be pressurized lines. For water. Oh, is it for water? Okay, so for water, there would need to be pressurized lines above an altitude of 85 feet. Electric, there are some parts of the railroad district that are serviced by Pacific Power currently, and additional connections would have to be installed for the future. Electric, it would rank lower on the list of infrastructure costs compared to crossing upgrades or some of the other ones like water and sewer. I'm gonna move us on to land use procedures, and then we have our discussion questions afterwards. So development in the city typically follows these procedures. So there's a UGB expansion, annexation, rezoning, subdivision, and development. The railroad district is unique in the sense that some parcels are already in the city, but most still need to be annexed within the city. So they still have to go through these 4 circles in the dotted line there. Our understanding is that in totality, going through the process of annexation, rezoning, subdivision development is roughly a 2-year process on the low end. The big piece to solve for is the infrastructure piece. If that piece was more known and there were plans and it was solved, then this timeline would look more reasonable. But included as part of the high level requirements for these land use procedures is the infrastructure piece. So that part is critical. The part we did not really look at is the UGB expansion piece, which again does not affect the railroad district because it is already within the urban growth boundaries. So we only looked at the latter land use procedures. But for any piece of land that is to be considered for development, this is kind of the flow of land use procedures that they would have to go through to develop. Okay, and then I'll end on next steps here. So you know what our team is working on next. So we have our first advisory committee that's today. We're doing key stakeholder interviews. Following our advisory committee meeting, we'll be working on estimating the infrastructure costs. So we laid out the state of infrastructure. We're gonna estimate the cost with the help of the public works staff. As part of the market assessment, we are trying to understand the level of market interest in the railroad district, and with that develop housing prototypes that would reflect the market interest in the railroad district and see if they're feasible or not. And update the unit capacity that the railroad district could hypothetically fit based on that market assessment. Finally, we'll look at development tools and strategies, whether that's funding, rezoning, other tools and strategies for property owners and the city to work together, but providing the city with a kit of parts for how to make development more feasible on a whole. Our next advisory committee meeting is in October timeframe. That's when we plan on sharing the results from the other items, the scope items that we have, our research items. We'll seek your feedback again then, and obviously from members of the public. And then we'll finalize our report and findings by end of year for the city and for planning commission.
So I get to the point here, what exactly are we supposed to be advising you? Or who are we advising and what are we supposed to be advising?
Yeah, for today, because it is mainly a fact-finding session, if we've missed anything in terms of infrastructure, the land use procedures, the history and the overview, today's session is around, did we get these facts right? Does this look right? Does the timeline of things and our understanding of how the railroad district came to be look correct? Are there details that we should know about?
So are you going to create a report then based on this meeting, which is going to identify the concerns each of us have brought up?
That will be a component of our findings, yes. That fits into, again, this earlier bucket of city and landowner commitment.
When would that initial report be created and distributed?
In the fall,
Yeah, it would be
in the
post,
fall.
yeah.
So we're gonna have no idea whether our input has had any effect on you until the fall.
It already has had an impact. I think by you attending today and us hearing you, that's already some data that we have that goes into our work and our understanding.
So today, we're trying to understand if we have the pieces of the facts that we're gonna use to do the subsequent. Let's go back to the next step.
Well, the only way we're gonna know as an advisory committee whether that's true or not is if we get a report from you that identifies our concern, because otherwise there's no accountability in terms of you reflecting in your report and acknowledging what we're telling you. I don't think it's a good idea to wait until fall.
Well, I think because we have members of like city staff here, Josh from DLCD, and we have the Road Valley Council of Governments here. Us hearing you talk about it is already a big acknowledgement, and I hope you take it in earnest that we hear what you say, and take it earnestly. Yeah.
What are the outcomes, the potential outcomes that you see from the feasibility study? I would agree, but there might be others, and you can say, great, let's look forward to those, let's change it, or let's tag it. Are there others that you're looking at, potential outcomes?
Those are, I think, great questions that the city's got to wrestle with once they have the benefit of, here's what you would have to do to achieve
So
feasibility.
you don't make a recommendation, you just say, here's what it's gonna cost, here's what you have to do.
And we will not shy away from saying these seem like, significant barriers to the feasibility of development, right? If that's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
But our job is to say, what would it take?
Yeah.
Right? And then the city's got to decide if that's a mountain that's too high, a hill too high to climb, right? But the job of us is not to make that decision. It's not for us to say, right? That's the city. Of saying, here's what it would take to achieve feasibility. Here's a couple of ways you could go about it. They're not insignificant. They require outside funding commitment, those kind of caveats, right? And then the city's got to say, well, that seems too much for us.
Yeah.
Right? And we really want to open up the process to evaluate other opportunities for housing development within. So that's a full blown issue, right? So, but yeah, I think generally those three decisions are the ones that the city would have to make at some point. I think they're on our track.
You also look at how possible expansion. Provided about that. Example in Saudi Arabia is where the thing where some city in California developed and they expand out the farm. People build, they move in, and then they start complaining about snow. No, that's what snow. And part of the road has farms with tractors and animals and et cetera, et cetera. And I just wonder if that is part of what we're looking at is what can happen to the people who are there, how are they gonna, affected, how are they gonna be affected, people who move in all over. And whether or not that's in process.
If there's conflicting uses, I think we could, endeavor to document that, but as Josh said, this is a really long range planning exercise and we don't have crystal balls.
And the question will be, when the development happens, it'll affect people. And that should be looked at on, during the basis.
Sure.
Just to back up a little bit, so this, I think you guys got to, this isn't a policy level document, so this isn't a document that's necessarily making recommendations to the city council or to the planning commission, city council. It's providing information to them to be able to make an informed decision. So this plan is already an urban growth boundary, so that decision to urbanize this area was made You guys know when this area is remember you can really.
So would have that have been the early nineties?
I mean, it was 90s.
So-
So going on 30 years ago?
So, yeah, so at that time, the city, the collective city made a policy decision to bring this into UGB. Whether that was a right or wrong decision, that's not what we're getting at with this discussion, but the land is in the UGB right now. If the city were to want to make some changes with it, then what you're talking about, the impact of the forest land, it's more, not necessarily exactly the people, but it's on the forest economy, that means what the agriculture that is part of the equation, but it's not part of the. I just wanted to let you know that that is looked at in planning program, but not with the project.
So what, I don't know, I'm wondering if there's any way, that you can address the fact that where the railroad district lies now also buffers on the fall wildlife urban buffer zone. And the additional costs that might be associated with that in terms of fire prevention, things like that. Is that something that you guys can work into what you're doing? If that makes.
I'm saying it.
I'm saying that's all forest and then up above. And if you look on the
Wildfire interface.
urban interface now,
Right.
that's right where it runs through that. And
I think to the extent that impacts, what would be required for emergency evacuation and emergency service in. Yeah, because that's an infrastructure constraint issue, a service issue.
hoping that you're aware of that.
Yep, but in terms of. Going beyond that, not really, I mean, it's like, can it be safely served and can people safely get out? That's.
I'm
the
trying to
primary.
keep with your criteria of helping this way. And I just wanna, there's always those things that sit on the edge, what
Sure.
is financial and what's morally responsible.
Yep.
Maybe not morally responsible, but is responsible. And I just wanted to make sure that that was something that it can be factored fiscally, that it is.
We're viewing that through the lens of infrastructure questions and emergency services.
Okay, got it.
I do wonder though, if there any building code requirements, I don't think there are that would be kicked in by being in the movie. I know the state of Oregon. Well, you know, I think the change, I don't know when you blow that, if the building.
The last fire chief here was basically saying, oh, sprinklers do work.
Inside.
And the sprinklers do work.
Right. Well, there've been some changes to building, but I don't want to take it down into the we're up. There've been some changes to building code when it comes to, you know, to different things as far as the siding, as far as the rest of all the things on homes. Whether that's triggered by being in the movie, I'm not sure. So that would get to what you're talking about, that would add.
Right, and I just want to sure that that's after that.
Well, sorry.
Right, I just have two things. One is what I didn't see up there that you guys were going through the record of the previous applications. With the gold money, but it's a long read, so you tell October.
Belmont decision.
Yeah, well, there's 3 of them on record, they don't get everything we know is really in here. And the other thing is, and I'm noticing respect to our public works department, so we never built a railroad crossing, much less one that's gonna, you know, the bridge gonna come up and all this crazy stuff. And I was wondering if maybe you thought about getting cost estimates from a jurisdiction that has experience with that, Jackson County Roads. Municipal point, you know, because they've done it. And they're not under these conditions, so it's almost conservative. Everybody dance. Yeah. But yeah. But it's.
Something that I'll use is, I think that's kind of working such a point, that experience. Too.
Okay.
Railroad crossing, encourage,
Except the simple point is flat, yeah, you know, this is more, but the one instance that we're aware of, because of what we're doing, is the need for intergovernmental agreements. Which are pretty costly and before many of these applications can be approved. Like that part of, the process.
Like legal fees.
No, intergovernmental agreements in terms of cost enclosures,
Yeah,
changing from public to private, ongoing fees, all of that stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah.
because that would affect all three processes, and I realize that could be adjusted, but it seems without the collective road being in place, all of those things are pretty unsafe. You're talking about funneling a lot of people through one process, so expenses, complications, as well as safety seem to be things that need to be dealt with.
Wow.
I didn't need.
Yeah, those are great details. We have some that we took notes on that aren't part of the slide. So today we're learning that for utility lines that cross the railroad, there are unique fees that are charged yearly as an agreement with. Okay, gotcha. But you're right. I think to extend infrastructure across the railroad district would require the coordination of a few different jurisdictions and agencies to come together. So in addition to the actual cost amounts, you know, physically to construct them, we are also untangling and also articulating that need for, you know, coordination, time, sign off, approval to get these things done. So,
As well as the ongoing cost of the city.
right. But on the note of infrastructure, let's finish this set of questions here. So in terms of major infrastructure improvements on our list, the big ones are the railroad crossings themselves, those are big. The collector road that fronts the railroad, that's a big cost. The water lines are probably next up in terms of cost.
Okay, sewer.
Sewer, yeah, sewer, water. And then the one lowest on the list is probably electricity. But,
Did you say stormwater in there?
oh yeah, sorry,
That's actually might be a bigger one than.
yeah.
Yes, that's what I meant. Stormwater, that's right.
So water, sewer, water, electricity, yes.
Are we looking at, you know, acquiring lands for the walking road as well as the documents?
Yeah, that would be part of our high level assessment, is the right of way acquisition. And what it would take to actually build the road itself.
I mean, it could be an acquisition, it could be a dedication as part of the joint development too. I mean, you know, there's multiple ways we get there, but yes, accounting for the fact that it doesn't exist today, it doesn't.
Are there major infrastructure pieces that we missed or should know about beyond those that were discussed?
I've got a couple of things that came up while you were talking, I mentioned it, Joy, that, there was a ballot measure for the urban renewal here in town 2 years ago. That part of that cost was the realignment, it went down, it didn't come out. Ralph really, $1.5 million tag on that, so a little bit. So, you know, looking at 800K. That doesn't even seem like 2015 numbers for it.
Right.
You mentioned water pressure and fire suppression. I also wanted to know if you were aware of the existing tanks at the end of Belmont on site for safe. And that they need to be retrofitted. So if there's any plans to include that. And also we've always wondered about putting properties with that. Where I live. How do I know? Yeah. Well, we've got the, irrigation ditch, but you also mentioned that, and I was looking through the plan and stormwater being caught in irrigation ditch is a huge part of what they're talking about, so. Sometime along here, I'd like to find out more what that looks like and how we. Who are you telling me today? Who is the? Well, it's from the.
In the initial master plan. Okay. for the-
Yeah, and we were. Okay. They're not really kind of possible.
Yeah, that brings up the whole issue of TID, we've never seen it discussed, given this maybe usually complicated. So that is just very confusing to something, I noticed it plans got short shrub and plan as well, and in my understanding, the zero definition and all the other agencies really involved with that.
I would say the only intel we have on that is the irrigation, talk about the irrigation canal. Yeah. Yeah. Right, and we talked with Public Works about that today, and it seems as though, you know, feel free to share your experience or your understanding, but it seems as though the primary issue there from a development feasibility perspective is that you can't just run off into the, can't just discharge stormwater into those canals, that's not legal.
That's much concern with stormwater, with the safety issue, there are, probably all of them.
Oh, the backhoes, they run backhoes, so they're.
There's also another thing that's going on in the house, because periodic. So there was a concern that people would be close to the canal, and I'm sure there's a host of other issues, but they wanted to store water.
Okay.
My understanding, and that's why I'm just bringing it up, I'm not an expert on TID or Bureau of Revelation issue, like, it's not very complicated and expensive. So it seems to me that the part of the study.
And the plan isn't super clear about where that collector road goes.
No,
It
it's not.
talks about actually burying the TID line and putting it under it places. But that doesn't address where it has gone, where it goes under the road and then crosses down on the downside of the tracks. There would have to be improvements made there. You know, and so.
Yeah,
There's a lot there.
currently, we're not aware of a development application triggering for more improvements on the canal beyond the cross, wherever roads cross it. Not to say that there's not operational considerations or safety concerns or certainly discharge concerns, but as long as there's stormwater pipe that directed stormwater that just so it does not flow into the canal and you can cross it. Those are the two primary concerns we're aware from a legal perspective. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that's right, I mean. There are practical considerations for sure, that would not necessarily happen as part of this project, but. As part of any development proposal, that's when the irrigation district would be solved, and they review that with the city and we have input there. Start with practical. Liability, safety, all that.
So I'm not to push the point too far, but how do you determine costs when you don't actually have a clear idea of where your road is going and what access on you have on irrigation? I mean, that if you're going to bury a mile of irrigation ditch with probably a 6-foot culvert, that would be a significant cost.
It would be, we're not necessarily assuming that that is a required component of this project. That's not our understanding. That it would be a required component. if the irrigation were just in the room, they'd say that was wonderful, but I don't know that that's technically legally required as part of development. That's not our understanding. I mean, you know, we don't know everything, but our understanding is that that's not. Unlike, you have to be able to get fire trucks, and that's a requirement. You have to be able to get people to their homes. You have to be able to, people have to be able to push the trailer. All that kind of stuff is like a requirement of development approval. Our understanding is that as long as you cross it and you're not flowing stormwater into it, those are the requirements around the irrigation plan.
Okay, but is that lack of understanding written into the report? Or do you assume that people who read the report understand it, but we not mention it?
But that is what we understand, is that those two components would be a requirement of development application. You can always go beyond what's required, but we're trying to understand what's legally required.
That in the report, so anybody reading the report can say, oh, we have to consider this too. It wasn't their responsibility, but they're letting you know that. I really shouldn't.
The report will center on what are technical requirements of development approval, and as we understand it, those are the two. If we clarify our understanding, but that's the understanding that we were provided by Public Works today, so.
That is something logical, moral to me. If you find something that is a concern, but it's not your responsibility, you ignore it.
So I think we should consult with TID, this is the town irrigation district is part of it, to look at what the potential kind of range of improvements that would be necessary. We can closely on that. Just to reiterate, this is a higher level, this isn't an engineering kind of document, it's not a policy document, it's a higher level document. So there's going to be estimates involved, and typically when estimates are involved, well, obviously they're not precise, because it's an estimate, but the built-in contingency pieces. You know, so, you know, it's not, they don't give a specific number often when it comes to what the total development cost can be, it's a range. When that range built in sometime now, well, you know,
What I'm saying is, if I know something that my wife doesn't know, but it's not like I mean, how to do it, how it's in the brother, say, well, it wasn't my responsibility, we should consider it by yourself.
I don't want to play the hypothetical game right now, but here's what I would say, if you have something specific that you think should be included from an infrastructure.
Like I mentioned, it's not a responsibility within the hospital, but then I think the idea that somebody else would.
Yeah, no, I think we should consult, we'll consult with TID to ask them whether we get a precise dollar figure on that. But I also need I need to refamiliarize myself with where the layout of that collector or connector or frontage road, whatever we're calling it is, to look at how that intersects with TID to be able to give you more information.
The only other thing I add is that I have to go find it, but there are issues with water pressure on the south end of town. That somebody lived there, but I also remember this. That there has been a push to improve hydrant pressure as well. Going to town now, at least real. So I think that's probably something that has to be considered as well as we're looking.
Thanks for that. Catherine?
My question has to do with, the collector or whatever you want to call it, if you build build. And, what would be the process for extending that land to the effective land?
It can happen a number of different ways, depending on the willingness of the property owner and what they would be willing to have the city do, but it might be a right of way acquisition, like we said earlier, where they would buy a piece of land from the property owner to designate as a future road. It could be a public-private agreement for a portion of the land, or it could happen a number of different ways, really. So it would be kind of a property by property specific case of how that collective road would be dedicated.
Well, what happens is, no way.
Yeah, you really don't, you have very few legal options at that point. You know, aside from condemnation, which is like the legal approach, but very rarely what someone wants to do. The city very rarely wants to go down that road.
That gets back to what I started the conversation with, there's a few critical linchpins, which if you can't solve those linchpins, you got no project, and it seems to me it's smart to focus on those linchpins as critical issues or topic priority. Otherwise, you're just wasting time. Of course, you guys are getting paid anyway, so it doesn't make any difference to you guys which way.
Tom, don't be facetious, we all wanna do a good job, and we wanna provide some good information. to the city. So,
Yeah,
we're
we're,
not just gonna do work,
we,
we at the state aren't gonna pay people to just do work to do work. We saw this as a critical need for the city of talent, to be able to make an informed decision on where, if it wants to grow here, and if not where, and they need this information to move forward. And that's.
No, I know that, I'm just trying to help you out here.
If you were interested in more public input, it would be really great to see these questions in the flash. It's a monthly, part of a free paper that comes out to everybody. And, we'd like, people look for them to go and answer these questions.
Okay.
Those would be great if you're interested in.
does that go out as like part of utility bill or something like that?
No, it comes out in the middle of a sort of free, it's called sneak preview.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the city, I'm looking at Gary, he's not helping me out here at all, but the city pays for a couple pages and side.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I don't
Okay.
know that we did that.
I'm sorry.
I don't think we did that.
Oh, thank you.
I do.
Yeah.
You don't get it. You get it, you know, but anyway, but if, you know, if you were interested.
We have to do that.
And, but the most important question to be up there is about the past applications. You know, what are people trying, because it's been three huge ones.
Yeah, do you mind?
There's a whole bunch of fields, there's a little bit, like, I mean, the records are just huge, and you're just full of technical information.
Yeah, we only really know about the Belmont subdivision, and we were curious if there were past attempts at developing. I see, okay. You think about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, now they are, I mean,
I do have a question about the housing numbers, you know, we find out for them to stabilize change. And Josh can speak to this part of it and we can, but, you know, every unit can have an additional dwelling unit, there's a whole bunch of different issues. So I'm very curious to know how you come up with what you consider build out, or if that's part of your, charge that may not be.
let me answer, I don't think the goal of this project is to reconcile that, so. Those numbers were put out, through a previous housing needs analysis that was to be done, that was pre-done with fire, so. We know that the needs in just the landscape change, right, just by how many homes were destroyed, so. That information would need to be updated to be able to provide some new information, not only based on what's vacant because it was destroyed in the fire, what's rebuilt, how much more densely or how differently it rebuilt, what changes the city's made to their code, which we've helped fund since then to be more efficient with their land supply. And then.
The street requirements, you know.
Oh.
Streets are narrower, there's no parking, and you have this really limit to be allowed, so that just enhances our concern that safe.
You're talking about the development capacity within the railroad
I
district.
see where you're going. I was thinking about those numbers basically,
I know.
they do something, but they're old, so they need to be updated.
I'm concerned about what the actual density might.
I-
realistically.
And that's, this project will get at that, it will look at, not only the changes in state law, but the changes in the state penalty, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so as long as you're gonna get to it, because that really enhances our concern about safety.
Yeah, there's the evaluation of alternative. Housing types. Will, since it's a low density zone district today. The alternatives are gonna be important. I mean, just put it out there, I mean, that we're gonna look. Partly because the density is at the low end of what some of the building thing, right? 400 units over that area is quite low density compared to the housing that's being built in the valley. But secondly, when we are trying to ask the question about feasibility, part of the feasibility is a cost question, and part of the feasibility is what can we do with the property, right? The market feasibility. So that's what we're asking there is, what kinds of housing would help to overcome some of these cost challenges? So you can't have, astronomical costs and very little that you can do with the property, that obviously doesn't work. And that's our goal, right, is to present under this scenario or these couple of options. We think maybe there's a path to feasibility, but then it's really the city's decision to decide. Is that kind of outcome what we want still? Is that kind of cost something that we want to participate in? So yeah, the options that we'll be exploring will represent a much wider range of housing types.
So then, for example, the city said it was 400 units in 2007, we were like 1,200, now that might be a decisions for them to do idea or not.
It's not about whether it's a good idea or not. For us, the question is, does that get you to feasibility or not? And then the city. Yep. So zoning is directly related to the question of feasibility, just like also.
Yeah, and that makes a piece of that entire puzzle of what we're calling feasibility, is the market piece. I want to take us to these questions around the history and overview. I feel like we covered the infrastructure piece, but hoping you could tell us a little bit about what makes the railroad district unique. What are the characteristics that you would use to describe the railroad district? And almost like the vision, I guess, of what it is to you.
Well, it was never a railroad. It was in the historic sense that the world never stopped really doing anything. So it's more like the other side of the tracks.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Anyone else have thoughts or?
It's a Gordian knot.
It's what?
If you know what that is.
Unsolved the problem.
I don't view it as a problem. It's ideal parkland, it's ideal open space, which a lot of property is, I think the properties that are there are certainly used to people who live there. And I'm outside that area, but that's how I think we view it. It's, in fact, we hope that it's some way to become part of it, we become part of it. Because there isn't anything on that area.
So I'll take my planning commission hat off and I'll put my guy in the bottom of the house. And walks his dog up there every day and looks at bear tracks and cougar prints and bird watches. And yeah. Training on the hill. So in terms of hiking and having the opportunity to really walk the TID ditch to town on a Sunday and go get lunch. It was great.
Okay, yeah.
That's how I I don't think you're the only one to do that. No, it's actually, it's gotten pretty busy.
So the development has happened. The end of the road, you know, everything. But it has found that it is remember.
With members,
Oh, yeah, that's it, yeah, that's you.
Okay, what, can you tell us more about the development project? Like what is it?
Well, I think that one major thing about it is that on the concept map for the master plan, it was shown as like future emergency exit, and then the plan just cut that off with houses, so it's, you know, it's still on the map, but it's not. There.
This is the portion of the road. Okay.
It's on the adjacent side of the chest.
On the plan, it's called.
Okay, yeah.
One.
Oh, it's on the side of.
Yeah.
Oh, I see, okay, that's why it's not. I got you.
I think the issue is, we consider pretty much, like there is no railroad district that puts on the plan is virtually all of the railroad. And that is an area for, that we all consider that we have extra risks as homeowners and landowners. But we can tolerate that because we have access, and we're willing to tolerate that. But I think we have a great concern that if we are densely populated, it would become hazardous. So I don't know how we express that as a value, but that I think all of us have, and it's hard to appreciate if you have never lived in an area that doesn't have the features that are below it and within the city limits. And I think that's
People coming in. And regularly pull off the side of it, that's something, that's something wild. You know, I just imagine that's one way to 15 homes. And if it was two roads with 400 wall, that's just crazy. We don't put it in, planet, there's no food, and there's people who live there coming in the way. Regular pull off the side, that's somebody, you know, it's not a problem because it's clearly something really probably trying to do. So just imagine, well, I cannot imagine restricted access with a great number of homes, with 2 cars, 3 cars per house. Just, that would just be insane.
especially if you follow through one access or you follow out
A fire, well, immediately, when most English present the fire, it's not the rural areas, the town. House next to house, the wind blowing. Fire department would stop it, they just got out of the way and said, well, we'll let it say rural areas, because it place that folks all attention. You go other places, they're out of the way, the pilots coming. Yeah, we're allowed to air fire. It's good. I'm afraid it's so low.
Okay.
And with all multiple places, that's a thing. It's just crazy, and emergency. If we man, maybe that's not for sure. And some of those maybe, you should know, people pushing the fire out of the way.
So I guess what I'm hearing is, well, one, to recap, the access to nature, green space, open space is kind of a big shared value of residents and nearby residents of the railroad district. But paired with that, safety and accessibility across the railroad itself is kind of a big concern. That's not right, yeah. Okay. So I'll jump to my third question here. I think the second question was around other development attempts, which, thank you, Joy. Sounds like there were 3 previous attempts to build on the Belmont subdivision lot. So the third question is around the railroad district's role for housing. Is that something that you think the railroad district has unique advantages to or challenges to? Give us your thoughts on. Okay.
I think, you know, there's needed housing, and then there's housing you need. And so far, all the development applications have been for Highland, Living City, housing, and you know, not really what
Well, that is what it's zoned for.
Pardon?
That's what the zoning is.
I know,
So the development applications are responding to what.
but, but it's also, 2.5 miles from downtown, I live in North Ashland. I do, everybody in my neighborhood lives in, works in Ashland, or the kids go to school in Ashland, but I'm in the city limits. I was going door to door with the mayor when she was campaigning, twice people said, hi, I'm Darby, I'm running for mayor, twice people said, the talent? Like, they were surprised, they was mayor, and that's how disconnected that part of town is from, and downtown town was fun. At night in the summer, it's really fun, I wish I could move that car, because we get it on home, but here we go.
I was gonna add that, the Florida fires. Low density, single family homes, higher end homes, which this whole plan is designed for. Were the ones that sat, that, we've had 365 days on most of those listings. The real estate, but this from our discussions, and it's anything, the time is up below $185,000, the lower cost home, but we keep talking about it, workforce housing, that didn't stay. So when we start talking about the urgent need for housing in our community, it's still not for upper end expensive housing. The only thing I wanted to add, and I wanted to jump back into, and I only know this, that I believe the arteries who are on the light industrial edge on the other end of the community have looked to try and develop their property, but most of their property is above at a 25 degree, if not more, slope. I think it's something like 40 PSI, because gravity feeding from their water for their irrigation. So there may be some conversations in the records when you guys are looking. I think that was probably back in 2017 as well.
Are you referring to this parcel that I'm circling on the map, the industrial zone parcel on the north?
Yeah, well, yeah, I believe they're either the next parcel or the one more over.
So somewhere here.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Great farm on it. Really, it's a beautiful farm.
Yeah, I think it's on.
No doubt.
So I just remember that as being, undevelopable to the level that they had talked about, and I pulling that out my house. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, over half of the land is road is over 10% slope, which is significantly down. So going back to the question on housing. There are some maps printed out around, we'll have to share, but certainly pull it up on the big screen, but the railroad district is a large district. It's the property close on the north end is different. The property is on the different, fundamentally different in terms of slope of things. That's what we were just talking about. So I'm kind of wondering, as we talk about what role the railroad district can play, if anyone wants to posit that portions of the railroad district are, more appropriate than others or more feasible than others. For a role in terms of the city, I'd welcome that too. We're just standing out there on that crossing is a fundamental different experience than standing on the phone.
Yeah, the light industrial, I'm not sure about. I don't know if that's the area that you're talking about.
That's the location of the other crossing.
Well, I think you stated, interestingly enough, that there is no cohesiveness to the railroads. There is no railroad system. So in fact, there's a plan that's called that, but it really does prove that it isn't a cohesive area. I guess my concern is, without a road, this is completely not feasible. And the fact that we had a tail wagging the dog in terms of the only development proposals, and since 2007, actually since the 90s, have been the tail wagging the dog, is somehow proof that this isn't very workable. I think the people who worked on the plan probably assumed it was going to proceed in a logical fashion from city center southward, and that just didn't happen. They didn't construct it so that it would happen that way. And so concerning going forward, is if when you increase density, that was one of the other questions, would that solve anything? I think that would make us even more concerned. As Richard has, the really good several comments that other people have, increasing density, which just make us even more concerned. I mean, want that.
Yeah, for saying that. I think this leads well to our fifth question here. Of everything we talked about, what are the most important things that need to be addressed from your perspective? So the collector road being one, providing accessibility from or across the railroad district, but also across the railroad. What other top priority things are on your list for in terms of addressing concerns?
Any that we haven't talked about. Ray's over here taking notes, Matt, so anything we've talked about. No, you can, feel free, I just wanna make sure.
Safety aspect is so, it's so hard to deal with because.
Yeah.
We're not qualified to deal with it, but it's the scariest part. I mean, we're just traumatized in this city. And it's, so scary to come to the window. So, yeah, to me, my biggest concern is safety and also impact on the city budget.
Yeah, that's not what we talked about. In safety, you're specifically talking about wildfire risk.
Well, and also, I mean, in 1997, we had a terrible flood, took out a water system, took out downtown Ashland. There was water coming through my house and my property. If we were gonna build a road from Belmont, it was my property. And it was just like a river coming through there. And the upper level, it's not the one that close to the upper level, it just pouring water out down that soil down to, and it was crazy. But it's been a long time since we worried about floods. Kind of with that.
I think that safety is an issue, but it's not just wildfire, during this flood, but there's, and again, this goes back to crossing closures, which what I think are pretty wired to this. I cannot imagine being funneled down to a road that goes rushing past Mark's house from Belmont, along with people that are on Tulsa and other people having to be funneled down the same path as well. And going in their horses. Yeah, but everybody. So I mean, it's a scary thought. Whatever the emergency would be, and it could be anything. We're sensitive to fire, but we're all sensitive to anything else. So that seems very irresponsible to have created this notion without a suitable solution. On my end of things, I'm particularly annoyed that I having to take part in this, and I'm not even in the city or urban growth boundary, and yet my property is a moving part. And no action of my own. I don't know what I can do is plow out an exit through the back 40. So anyway, it's just an ongoing safety and a notion that this was an irresponsible plan to begin with. It clearly did not get into the details of how to implement it. And as a result, we're left hanging when applications had actually come through. So it was really not well thought out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, the reality that is happening right now. You could imagine just continuing where there's a development application, a small development application that gets denied locally and approved. one little bit at a time, you know, it may take 50 or 100 years. But because it's in the UGB, there's only little allowance for that, and I don't think anyone really wants that, but that's actually, that's the path right now.
Except that it forces the city to consider whether or not it wants to extend funds, because all of the expenses are on the city, they're not on the applicant. They're on the applicant. So that we will be huge outcome of your study is really capturing what the costs are going to be. And they're enormous. I mean, we're talking tens of millions of dollars for something that nobody wants.
Just want to go down about going up and out the back 40, we had a small fire on the hill, a couple of kids went out there and caught some stuff on fire on the fire department, trying to go up the TID road and back, they got stuck. So it was just a neighborhood now. With care of it before it comes to big, so you can't go out to that, right? You can't go out to that story.
Thank you. There was that nice statement.
Yes. The things that we don't have, not even have a problem because the higher you go, they on the road across, okay, they can put force on. And where we already longer, we saw there, we lost you, the I discovered a long body of the unfortunate that I didn't know the big complicated on tree. And I pulled the one out of a long body of a little farm. But the more we have homes closer to the forest area, the more we have access to the invasion by wildland. And if you want the wildland, they can do it, but they roam around. It's like just so that they don't harm.
Gotcha. Well, we have about a little over 10 minutes left, so I'll get through the rest of these questions. Are there any perceived upsides to the railroad district that we should be thinking about for residential development?
Or any portions of the railroad district. That, as we kind of discussed earlier today, it's not an all or nothing thing. So for the city, at the end of the day, it'll be a policy discussion, whether they think it makes sense to develop all of it, or whether they don't want to develop any of it, or is there a portion of it that actually makes sense? So maybe in that regard, is there any portion of the railroad district that actually has an upside to develop, where you're not necessarily having to do all of the infrastructure?
Define development. I mean, how built out are you talking about?
I'm not even, it's anything, I would think that.
I can do.
Well, no, but what I was thinking about is for residential development, is there any portion of the railroad district property that would actually make sense to develop the type of housing that we need, and it's an open-ended question.
Well, you know, when you look at the map, the part that's like industrial, it's like, oh, look at that, it's right on our big city park, except for it's not, because there's a ditch and a railroad. And so it's just inaccessible, you know, and yeah. I'm really trying hard, I have no money to answer that question, but I also keep remembering that, you know, the Moore's Vineyard is one of the oldest successful, I mean, they were pioneering winemakers in this valley, they really started it. And I think that is and they're still up there working away, you know, and it's just fun when all the breaks come through, you know, big things and I know that historic project seems very important to me, and on either side of that, there's no access, I don't know how we could do that. And we've got all this black land out here on the bus route, sitting there, making the.
Oh, and I-
Mhm. Oh, yeah. And there's no, I mean, we don't even have buses down on this part of town avenue anymore. Because they don't like the hill down the 99 when the weather's bad, so they cut off on our nose and make the highway. And so, you know, it's like.
And I actually know the person who runs RDPD and they have no interest in extending the bus line that way because that hill is treacherous and one.
Yeah, they don't even.
Another consideration.
It's what it is, I mean, that's feel like.
As it pertains to this, since we have. 10
Okay,
minutes.
it is.
Okay, otherwise we can figure out that.
Well, it's just, you know, I'm thinking about our housing needs analysis, so. And it's like, it just seems like because we have regional problem solving already, that our housing needs analysis should be part of a larger one. It's just, you know, up to 250 acres. And
Most of that is industrial though, by the way. Okay.
really, huh, well, that's disappointing. But anyway, but you know what I'm saying, it would be great if we could have our own ones inventory, be part of the picture here.
So and I kind of didn't say this because I don't want to take up too much time, but quickly, the state of Oregon is going through a whole kind of new big thing about housing needs in the state. Is going to be really fairly drastically amending how we look at housing production and housing needs analysis in the state. It's going to be more like regionally based and looking at things differently. So I don't, it's still playing out. I don't know what's, I'm not making any promises, but it will be looked at a bit differently than that.
That would be how that's.
So when we accidentally walked out of the room, I was asking the same question about, you know, are there portions of the, what's in the railroad district boundary that feel sort of less concerning than others? We talked about earlier. You know, when we were standing out at that railroad crossing right at the industrial portion, if you look at the map, you know, the northern coast, it's the flattest and has, it's adjacent to the road, and there are sort of fewer barriers, physical barriers than are standing out on Belmont. And so that was trying to happen as well. You know, are there portions of the road that have are perceived to have fewer barriers or higher opportunities? Didn't get a lot of. I don't know, if I take another bite at that apple, but this question number 3 is another kind of way of asking that question in a way, more specifically, you know, if there are, if the railroad district itself, a portion of the railroad district were to kind of move forward with some kind of development, what are the most important components? So there's certain types of housing, right, that are of significant interest, or safe pedestrian amenities, etc. What are the most important community needs that should be addressed alongside and I think one of the questions that we're short on time that I think that we must use to focus on is sort of the housing type question, right? We understand that there is sort of a laser focus still really on housing, on affordable housing as a priority. So when I say affordable housing, restricted to people with sex or income levels. That's kind of the focus. So
I don't think anybody believes any affordable housing here can be built from railroad. Anybody that knows, you know,
They put
what's
it in
going
the
on.
flyer.
I mean, there's nothing legally precluding that. So
Hmm?
there's nothing legally precluding it.
No, it's just reality. It's like people that think they can fly.
Not sure I see the comparison, but I mean,
Well, there's certain practical considerations. Well, you can't, right, but I mean, if you can't make it work, it's just not gonna happen. And if anything's gonna be built there, it certainly isn't gonna be affordable.
Unless it's subsidized, which is most of the affordable housing that gets built in our state, in our country, in our region, it's subsidized. And that's what affordable housing almost always is.
Well, it didn't used to be that way. We're going after the policies, you know, the land use policies that were implemented, unfortunately, in 1972, with Senate Bill 100. that caused it to do that.
I have some data that we could take this offline, because I'd happily have this conversation with the others here.
So I was gonna say, I think that the other issue with the light industrial zone is that the soils and the properties, the farm properties around it are fine soils. So what you're going to run into is if you're talking about that interface question of farmland, people paying at 2 o'clock in the morning for that problem of people living close to active working farms is always a problem. And I think that's where in the plan they talked about, I think their solution to it was getting people to sign up, we won't complain when you buy a property. So I think there's issues with that, that it doesn't make for, even if, I get it, subsidized housing is an important factor since it will allow it for 15 or 20 years. I'm just not sure how that fits with the rural, the use of the benefit of that.
Yeah.
But, planning commission, I support it.
There are some buffering standards, we don't need to, there are buffering standards that are in your code, through regional problem solving, and we're kind of trying to mitigate that, but that needs a plan. That could be used for market.
So on number 3, affordable housing, I will advocate all day long for that. But we can't require it, and there's no services nearby. Even down on the north end of this, it's not within walking distance to transportation and shopping or good. Yeah. So there's no services, and putting affordable housing where there's no services isn't that helpful, because then you've got to have a car, I think. And all that. I don't know if you guys have maybe the preservation of the natural areas on the Belmont part of the site, that's a large part of it. It's going to remain natural because of the steep slopes, but also there's a large wetland on that it's always had to be part of the applications. And so, people get density bonuses, but there are natural areas in there. But one of the cost factors, I don't know if you've looked at, and if we find this in the 2018 application, is because it was the land is unstable, if you go to water on that, it's all like all the time. And so the foundations for that live in the park when we allow this land for us to allow development.
Yeah, that's a good consideration. As part of the market assessment, we've been starting to interview developers in the region just to get their expertise and knowledge on building, especially building on slopes. So that's a piece of feedback we've been seeking more explicitly with them, are the unique challenges and the associated costs ramp up due to, conditions like slopes. So thanks for being.
Geological report of the 2018 application for anyone is the national, they're still around with that.
Good too.
They call N, right?
It's AMHEREI.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. Well, we're coming up on time. Are there any final thoughts or comments you wanted to make for today's advisory committee meeting? Yeah.
I'm really frustrated that we weren't so neat for each question, but I hope that we.
I can show my.
Okay.
I was trying to keep track of which ones we had sort of addressed. In the flow of conversation, so that we make sure we didn't skip any that we had on. So I agree with you. Always nice to go through, but I was trying to feed Victor some intel on which ones we hadn't thoroughly covered.
Yeah.
I'm sure you understand that frustration after having been through so many applications, and it's been a long ride.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
We agree.
Yeah, our goal here would be to, provide enough information that the city can make some bigger decisions coming out of this, right? Because that's what's gonna take one way or another. Either a doubling down at commitment or a different direction.
That's what the Eagles officer said, for the last appeal, he said, well, no, you know, I can say, yeah, I approve it, but it's still gonna be a policy decision because it's about budget. We're glad that it's taking the step. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for taking your time out on such a beautiful day to be with us. Hopefully everyone can go enjoy the last ray of the sunshine.
Thank you so much.
Everybody. Not that I- no. Gosh.
Yeah.
Good work, you guys. You're not that bad working.
I know.
Go a little like. See you in the-
No. Sounds like they're.
Gary, great meeting you. Appreciate it.
So here's your.